After looking at the Crystal Serpent last Terraria weapon review, it seemed only fair to move on to its close-range counterpart, which is also obtained at a similar point. And interestingly, the weapon we're going to be looking at today does find itself in the middle of functionally similar indirect upgrades throughout the game. Of course, I'm talking about the Crystal Vial Shard. Despite its questionable looks, the Vial Shard does offer some great damage output for you early hard mode mages. But the thing is, with so many other fantastic mage weapons which are relatively easy to obtain, like the Sky Fracture and Meteor Staff, does it deliver enough to be worth getting? Before this though, just wanted to say if you're looking for some awesome Terraria merch for the new year, don't forget to use code SOCKERTCHECKOUT for 15% off anything you purchase in the store. Oh, and very soon, these epic figurines will be shipped out, so make sure you don't miss them. Okay, let's see how you get this thing. For those of you who don't know, the Crystal Vial Shard is in fact a hallowed mimic drop, meaning as soon as you think you're ready in early hard mode, you'll need to venture down to your underground hallowed. Once you're there, there is a slight chance you do bump into one at random, which can be even more likely using a lifeform analyzer. But, unless you're an absolute god at the game, I'd highly advise against this, as you can be very easily 2-hit or even 1-hit by this thing in such a small space. So, if you want to have a much easier time and future-proof yourself for later, you should absolutely build a nice big layer farm like this, as it will not only make the fight much safer, but will also increase the spawn rate, making regular and biomimics much more common. Of course though, if you happen to have such a pitiful skill issue like myself, you could absolutely guarantee the kill with underspec gear by collecting 15 Souls of Light and crafting a Key of Light at a workbench. By dumping this in an empty chest and leaving it, you will summon your very own hallowed mimic, which you can fight now in a much more open, controlled environment. And with the Vial Shard having a 25% drop rate, hopefully you'll get it first time like I did here. Okay then, let's see if it's any good. As mentioned earlier, the Crystal Vial Shard does function similar to a handful of other weapons in the game, namely its pre-hardmode alternative, the Vial Form. Now, while its functionality doesn't change much with this version, its range and DPS most definitely does, allowing to deal damage from a much safer distance. Saying this though, on single targets it's not that great, partly due to its low base damage of 25, ouch, and the fact it can only hit a target once at a time, meaning stacking them like this doesn't really do anything. And speaking of projectiles, one massive bonus that comes with this weapon which I think needs to be appreciated is the fact that, like the Death Sickle, it can completely pass through walls and deal damage through them no problem. The only problem is though, at a core, its DPS is a bit less than the Crystal Serpent on single targets, and it even loses to the Life Drain, a weapon meant for massive groups. So I mean, it better be damn good at the multi-target test, right? And luckily, with no damage fall off to speak of and quite a long attack length, this can deal some seriously impressive DPS to lines of enemies, beating the likes of the Crystal Serpent and even the Group King, the Life Drain. The only thing to keep in mind is though, with the Vial Shards lingering for a couple of seconds before disappearing, making sure you vary the places in which you cast them will have a big impact on your final DPS output. So I mean, with this in mind, what's it like against the real thing? Well, as you can see, it can evaporate low HP groups no problem, at basically the same speeds as a Life Drain. And you know, despite its lower base damage, with a bit of I-Core, its time to kill on these mimics really isn't that bad, and should be able to tackle any tanky enemies fine-ish. I say fine-ish because against a single biomimic, it wasn't really that good, basically dealing less than the Crystal Serpent and the Life Drain, while also being difficult to hit, putting your character in danger. And this doesn't really set us up nicely for bosses. However, before we jump to all doom and gloom, it's about time we fully unleash the potential this has for wiping out worm-like enemies. Yeah, the Crystal Vial Shard is yet another destroy-deleting tool of destruction. What was that, like 4 seconds? Just keep in mind though, if you don't hit the perfect RNG on him spawning, the fight will take a little longer than some of the other ideal destroy-cheese weapons. Okay, now time for the bad again, with me not really being able to recommend this weapon for any other boss fight. Like, its damage is low, it's hard to use without taking damage, it's all around just not great, and funny enough, if I were to recommend this on any other hard mode boss, it'd actually be Terra, as you can kinda just dupe it by spinning in circles. Well, at least for the first stage, then it gets all kinda crazy. And speaking of crazy, one of the major perks of having a tile phasing weapon means you can utterly cheese a load of events and invasions throughout hard mode, letting you obtain much more powerful weapons by simply just sitting in a box and firing upwards. So if you're really after something, the Vial Shard could be a fantastic first step. But if you're looking for an actual reliable early hard mode mage weapon to take you to Terra, you're probably better with something else, as it's far too much of a master of one than a jack of all trades. This has been sockrteez, and I'll see you in the next one.